All right, Bulls and Bears, BX4 back with another dose of economic reality. Welcome to today's show. Thank you very much for being here. As always, a lot of financial economic news and everything related to finance and economics. To get caught up on today, please make sure you're subscribed. Let's go ahead and get started right now. Folks, most of you have to know we have huge changes coming up in the next few weeks with the new administration scheduled to take control here. EV benefits are being rolled back. So if you're investing in electric vehicles, if you hold the stock of Tesla or other electric vehicle companies, or just invested in the technology, you may want to think twice. We're going to show you a couple things that are going to be changing bigly with electric vehicles and a lot more. We've got prices rising still. We've got people from the Fed, opposite views. Some people say we need to cut rates. Other people say we need to raise rates. So it's pretty interesting, the divergence that we have amongst the quote-unquote experts. A lot of other stuff to get into. NFL players getting evicted. People with $1 million+ salaries getting evicted from their apartments. Very strange how somebody with $1 million a year salary, after all the expenses and paying their agents and stuff like that, of course they don't have $1 million left over, but it's still strange that people can't afford rent even with $1 million starting salary here. So let's go ahead and get into it right here. Here's something that shocked me here out of news.au, Australian news outlet. Coffee prices expected to hit $12 a cup by the end of 2025. Coffee lovers might have to save a few extra dollars in their weekly budget simply to afford a cup of Joe, experts warn. I like coffee, but not that much. Coffee lovers could soon not be able to justify their caffeine fix daily, with experts warning a single cup of coffee $8 to $12. The Australian Restaurant and Cafe Association chief executive said skyrocketing costs of beans were putting pressure on cafe owners. Up to 30% of businesses will feel heavy pressure by these increases. The supply chain to cafes and restaurants, including beans, has often been affected by weather. Now, we've seen similar predictions with prices here in the U.S. Not that much. That's kind of an extreme one there. But we have a lot of disruptions. What they're talking about now is weather-related disruptions. I don't think we're going to see that high of a price for coffee in Australia or in the U.S., of course. And they also go on to talk about the cost of shipping rates and shipping containers. I thought that was health crisis stuff. I thought that was coming out of the health crisis. Remember, we saw the hundreds of cargo ships off the coast of California, and there was a big backup because of the supply versus the labor shortage, as they used to call it. So interesting. I don't think we're going to see that explosive skyrocketing prices. I mean, some people say I'm doom and gloom, but even I don't think it's going to be as bad as they're reporting with coffee. And if it is, I mean, people are just going to have to stop drinking coffee. I mean, people love their coffee. Many people can't go through a day without coffee. But we'll have to see how that plays out, folks. Electric vehicle investors, be wary. Be very wary and be on alert. Electric vehicle sales rush for dealers. Automakers posted record electric sales in December, but another segment looks to be on the verge of a big change here. The incoming administration here coming up here in a few weeks, many changes set to take place. The transition team revealed plans to implement tariffs on imported vehicles. So that's going to affect the EVs coming from other countries, not just EVs, but all vehicles. But specifically to EVs, they're getting rid of the tax benefits. This is going to be the incoming administration plans to end the $7,500 consumer tax credit for EV purchases that was enabled by the Inflation Reduction Act. Remember, it was $1 trillion to try to reduce inflation, which is a joke because we don't need reduced inflation, which means prices are going up just more slowly. We need deflation. We need a lower cost of living, not a cost of living that's rising just more slowly than previously. We need deflation. Of course, nobody's going to let that happen, because as soon as deflation happens, the economic illusion of a growing economy gets blown to pieces. Because remember, it's debt and the accumulation of more debt and spending that is entered or chalked up as economic growth. So they have to continue the bubbles, keep the bubbles inflated until they find a good reason to let the bubbles bust. And of course, they're not going to take the blame. We're talking about the economic engineers, the controllers, the one that run the money printer, so to speak, the central banks. We know they're not going to want to take the blame, so they're going to have to wait for something big to happen. And we talked in our last episode about a lot of risks that we need to look out for. And it's not just me saying that. We showed you some major publications in that report. They're saying look out in 2025 because they need an excuse to bust these bubbles, to burst these bubbles. The problem is if the bubbles burst, they usually don't stay bursted for long. Look like 2020, or look at 2020, where prices should have come down in a major way. There should have been massive deflation, massive job losses. Home prices should have crashed by 50, 60, even 70%. But what happened? They put a floor under the price of these assets and they kept the bubbles inflated with record-breaking liquidity injections into the economy, into the markets. All right, folks, the price increases, the price levels that we're seeing is not because everybody's rich. This is based on borrowed money. This is not organic growth, right? This is based on a currency that can be created in endless amounts out of thin air. Ever since we came off the gold standard in 1971, many people that follow that type of thing, warned about that for many, many years, and they even sounded crazy for a while. Okay, what's the problem with creating endless amounts of money? Well, now we're finally seeing the consequences. We've seen it over the past 50 plus years since we got off that standard, but now it's really starting to wake people up, and people are realizing, hey, this is not good. If this continues, how are people going to survive and continue to get by with this cost of living that's just going up and up and up? Now, some people may make the argument, well, it doesn't matter if the cost of living goes up. As long as wages go up, then people can still handle it. People can still keep up with it. That's if you are working, if you get a job. But even if you have a job, and we've seen just over the past few years, for the most part, wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living. If in a perfect world, we wouldn't even have to be talking about this, but wages would keep up with inflation in a perfect world. But we know a lot of the money gets kept at the top with, of course, the CEO, the upper level executives taking a big portion of the profits for a lot of these companies and paying workers just enough to try to keep most people working, right? And not have them just quitting because they're not making enough. So just enough to keep them in there, but not enough for people to save up enough money to retire. Of course, they don't want that either. The ones running these companies, they don't want to pay people so much where they're just going to go ahead and retire. And I'm surprised more CEOs didn't resign. We did see a record year in 2024 for CEO resignations. And I'm surprised it's not more, because once you make several $1 million, to me, I would just get out of the rat race and, 1 billion, 2 billion, 100 billion. Once you get past a certain point, it seems like it would all be the same. But we have people out there like Warren Buffett, like a lot of these billionaires, that just want to continue to gain more and more and more wealth. Right? Bezos, I can go on and on. The list goes on and on. Speaking of elevated prices, the Telegraph, of course, not in the U.S., but still, cost of living is affecting everybody worldwide, folks. Why the American dream of owning property is dying. First-time home buyers face universal struggle, but the U.S. market is the toughest to break. And decent article. I disagree with a lot of the stuff they're talking about there. They didn't even go back to the way money is created. They talked about a lot of things. They talked about lack of down payment assistance programs. Folks, that's not true. They got a couple more rolled out just in the past day or two. A new down payment assistance program specifically for nurses, because nurses having a hard time living close to where they work, like some of the downtown areas and where the hospitals are. So they have to commute, a lot of them, very long distances. But that's not just true for nurses. That's with any occupation. Even teachers here in San Diego have the big problem where they have to live way out in the outskirts of San Diego County, and some of them commuting, same thing, an hour each way to school and back. And then you have the long day at school and the commute on top of that. It's creating a very stressful and tiresome environment for not just people in education, but all different occupations with these commutes. The highway's congested, bumper to bumper, stop and go traffic. It's just a big stressful mess. If working wasn't stressful enough, the traffic can be just as stressful sometimes, and the commute can be just as stressful as the actual job, even more stressful depending on your location. All right, here's something that I thought was interesting here. This is out of AL Sports, and we've got a receiver for NFL team, the Bengals, being evicted. And his situation was so dire with having to find a place to live, he didn't even make his last game. Okay, so according to this, he was on injury reserve, so it wasn't a big loss. Burton is his name, Jermaine Burton. An eviction notice against him and all occupants of his apartment on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. $2,506, folks. That's how much an NFL player is getting evicted over, right? It almost doesn't seem possible. Burton, 3 years remaining in his contract, third round pick eventually or ultimately had a signing bonus of $1,053,000. That was only guaranteed a portion of his 4-year, $5.8 million deal over 5 years, and he is getting evicted. I mean, how much is his rent? I'd really be interested in seeing that. But the fact that you're making millions of dollars and you're renting an apartment and you didn't buy something, even in Ohio where homes are pretty affordable compared to many other states, that's crazy, folks. NFL players getting evicted. So it just shows you no matter how much money you make, if you don't manage it well, you can end up in big, big trouble. And a lot of these people, not just NFL players, but a lot of people making good salaries go out and they buy a lot of flashy stuff, a lot of fancy cars. Some of these sports figures have a whole fleet of cars, which is unnecessary. I mean, yeah, you want to show off. You want to look cooler than the next guy or cooler than the next player in this case. Maybe you're showing off for your teammates. Maybe you're showing off for your just people that know you or knew you growing up. You want to show them how successful you are by how much cool stuff you can buy. Whoever dies with the most toys wins, maybe. That type of mentality. But it just boggles my mind, folks, that people with those types of salaries. And I talked about the Mike Tyson fight was a couple months ago now, how Tyson had to basically embarrass himself to get into that fight with Jake Paul for the money. He admitted he did it for the money because in the interview after the fight, the interview person asked him, "What about your legacy? Does this destroy your legacy?" He said, "Legacy doesn't mean nothing." I'm paraphrasing. He said, "Legacy doesn't mean nothing. It doesn't pay the bills," or something like that. Saying, in other words, that it was all about the money for him, and he's not embarrassed. He doesn't care about any sort of legacy. All right, people, let's transition a little bit here. Let's talk about technology and some of these driverless vehicles. Here's something pretty scary that was caught on video, and it's a growing part of the economy. The autonomous vehicles, not just electric vehicles, but autonomous vehicles where they're self-driving vehicles. According to many, that's going to be an economic boom because they don't have to pay the drivers. So these companies are going to save a lot of money, and taxi companies and stuff like that are going to save a lot of money by not having to pay the driver, which when you think about it, it's actually bad for the economy because it's more people out of work. If you ask the taxi drivers, I'm sure they're going to say it's a bad thing. Look at this, folks. Let's give this a play here and a listen.
Yeah, I got a flight to catch. Why is this thing going in a circle? I'm getting dizzy.
Stuck in a loop.
Look at what it's doing.
On Monday, Waymo passenger Mike Johns took an unexpected detour to the airport when his autonomous car kept driving around a small traffic circle in a North Scottsdale parking lot.
It literally was just going in a loop.
John suspects the area's layout led to the car getting confused. He says after several minutes of circling and about 8 laps, a voice came over the speakers.
If you have your app pulled up, I need you to tap My Trip in the lower left corner of your app.
Can't you just do it? You should be able to handle it. Take over the car. You don't need my phone.
A tech worker himself, John says he supports the development and deployment of autonomous vehicles. But when he was late for his flight and
The guy that got stuck in the car is a tech worker that supports autonomous vehicles, but is he going to support it after this?
didn't know how to manually open the locked doors, he felt powerless.
If we got to the 10th loop,
He was locked in the car.
Jump into the driver's seat. What happens there? What happens next? Because the car is still in control. I could bench press 300 plus, but am I able to control this? Is somebody playing a joke on me?
This was John's second Waymo ride. and he left feeling like a guinea pig rather than a guest.
Waymo, he ended up being late for his flight.
It's like people are the experiment.
We reached out to Waymo for comment Saturday. They
People are the experiment.
haven't responded. On its website, the company says it's on a mission to be the world's most trusted driver. And in its first 25 million miles on the road, Waymo claims their cars had 81% fewer airbag deployments and 57 fewer police-reported incidents compared.
So of course Waymo's saying that they're much safer than the average typical human driver.
To human drivers. While Waymo says its phone-a-friend style customer service system can remotely check the car's sensors and cameras to assist passengers, Johns was surprised customer service couldn't do more.
Well, can you stop this car?
I am trying
My
to pull it
goodness.
over right now. Apologies.
So there was something I had to do, edit my ride. That's it. Edit my ride. Then all of a sudden it went from loop to then finally figuring out how to get out the parking lot.
Thanks to a flight delay, Johns made it back to LA on time, and he says he plans to use other rideshare services.
No, so he got lucky. So his flight got delayed. So therefore he ended up making it to the airport on time to still catch it. But very interesting, folks, when you see these ways that people think are going to help overall, but is it going to help? And then what happens if there's a big hack, if there's a big infrastructure or technology takeover? Can you imagine this happening on a larger scale with all kinds of accidents and cars crashing, stuff like that? Like something out of a movie, like what was that movie, Leave the World Behind, about a survival, like end of the world type of situation where all the electric vehicles started crashing into each other. All right, interesting to think about. I personally, the technology is cool, but I wouldn't want to ride in one of those vehicles. Just, let me know down below. Do you believe they're safer? Would you ride in one of those? Do you trust them? Do you trust technology more than your human taxi driver? All right. Personally, I don't, but it depends on the driver. Obviously, if your driver's been tipping or something like that, that case you might want to prefer a autonomous vehicle. But what do you think about that down below? Would you ride in one of those vehicles? Have you ridden in one of those vehicles? Please let me know. All right, let's move on here, folks, to the de-dollarization that we heard so much about in 2024 especially. But now we've got a reversal. Could it be because of the threat of tariffs? India, and this is out of a BRICS news outlet here. India rejecting BRICS currency, aims to promote the U.S. dollar. So this is a big 180 for one of the founding members of BRICS. We have the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa were the initial ones that created the BRICS, and those are the letters that represent the BRICS, BRICS. So one of the members of the initial country is saying they're going to promote the U.S. dollar. So things can change in a hurry, folks. And is this good news or is this bad news? Could this mean less inflation if the dollar's going to remain a staple in global trade? And with countries doing this, countries like India, does this give you more confidence in the U.S. dollar now? All right, and it goes out of here. This is out of Watcher. BRICS member India remains skeptical of a common BRICS currency, citing risks of alienating global trade ties with the U.S. Leading import and export businesses in India and those stationed in the U.S. want to keep the U.S. dollar intact. Indian businesses are now cautious in embracing a common currency as it risks disrupting the normal flow of commerce. Well, just because something's normal or historic, just because it's been done for decades, doesn't mean it needs to continue. So it's very interesting. But when you look at the price of gold, and when you see the central banks especially accumulating gold, we know that I still think this fiat currency is on borrowed time. The dollar is on borrowed time. But things can play out and last much longer than most people anticipate. Investors in precious metals are still, many of them, highly disappointed. Many people thought gold would be $10,000 and that silver would be in the $100 plus range by now. But remember, there's price suppression, folks. And as long as you have endless amounts of money that can be created in secret or in the background, you can manipulate things. You can keep the price tamped down of certain things. You can cause bubbles and other things. And keep bubbles inflated for a very long time. And that's the scary part of it, folks. These economic engineers, you don't know what they have planned, and you know what they want to do with these unlimited creation powers that they have at the click of a mouse, trillions of dollars if they want, folks. So very scary times, but also very interesting times, and also very exciting times with the transition coming up here. What's going to happen? Are you more optimistic, or are you more kind of sketchy about the direction that we're headed and the changes that are going to be implemented? I have a mix of both. I'm a little bit, I'm anticipating what's going to happen. I'm a little bit excited and also encouraged, but I'm also being very cautious. As I mentioned in my previous video, I sold off some more investments, kind of taking a wait and see approach, see what happens, at least for a few more months here, while these unprecedented changes are going to be taking place, folks. So interesting times either way. Thanks for watching this report. Please let me know what you think about all this down in comments, and we'll see you next time here on this channel. Bull Boom Bear Bust out. Please make sure you're subscribed. We'll see you on the next report. Bye for now. Peace.